My name is Nicola White. I'm a licensed Thames mudlark, well known for mudlarking on the River Thames and for researching the stories behind the objects I find. What happened when I handed over 10 of my mudlarking finds from Greenwich and Deptford in southeast London to 10 heritage trainees to research? What untold histories and intriguing facts did they uncover during the 7-week Lost and Found project? Come with me during this exclusive 10-part Lost and Found series to meet the trainees and to hear what their research has revealed. The Lost and Found project is produced by the Thames Festival Trust and made possible by a grant from the National Lottery Heritage Fund. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 10 of the Lost and Found series, the last episode in the series. Can you believe it's the last episode already? And as you can see, we're in a completely different setting because actually it's pretty rainy and horrible outside. So we are in my studio today. So episode 10 of the series, during which 10 heritage trainees studied 10 of my mudlarking finds from Greenwich and Deptford to discover and explore the untold maritime stories of Deptford and Greenwich. And today we are going to be focusing on prison hulks, and I have with me an expert on that subject, Dr Anna McKay. Anna, please can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, I am a lecturer in public history at Keele University, and my research focuses on prisoners across the British Empire. So I've done a lot of research on prison hulks.
That is very exciting, and actually it's kind of worked in my favour a bit that Ted Tinkler, who is the heritage trainee who studied these handmade tokens here, wasn't able to be here today because I am really fascinated with prison hulks, and I've found a few things that I think could be related to the hulks, and this is just the most wonderful opportunity to rack your brains about them and have a conversation about prison hulks. But firstly, can I offer you a cup of tea?
Please. I'd love one.
So we've actually got a teapot today instead of a flask, but it's still the Empress Grey M&S in the tie-line art mugs.
Fabulous, thank you.
So what I'll do is I'm going to just read a little paragraph from Ted Tinkler's essay, which he wrote about these little tokens here that he studied, these handmade tokens, which we believe are gaming tokens. So he has said, were they lost from a local workhouse or pub? Were they dropped from steps that led down to the Thames, a site itself associated with gambling? Did they fall from the deck of a prison hulk during someone's daily routine? Wake at 5 a.m, forced labour, looming transportation, lost lead tokens. So this is a really good place to start talking about prison hulks. Would prisoners have had the opportunity to make and play with tokens, do you think?
Definitely, yeah. So Ted mentions, you go and work in the dockyard in the morning, you can steal things from the dockyard where you work. So you can go into, the naval stores where you might be, working on certain things, and you can take little bits of lead and, put them in your pocket and take them back to the ships. And so in the evenings, you're kind of left to your own devices. So it means that, people would hammer out small bits of copper or, carve little bits of wood or even bone from their food that was, leftovers, and you could make them into little things like this.
And they're so tactile, aren't they? Have you had a closer look at some of them? That one, some of them look like dominoes,
yeah,
don't
this
they?
one definitely. We've got a 3 and a 2 here.
Yeah. And some of them just have, this one's got 4 holes, for example. Some of them have got 3 holes. There's different shapes. Some of them have actually got numbers.
Oh, yeah, number 3.
On them.
Yeah, so we've got some that have been kind of stamped with holes coming all the way through, and then other ones have been sort of like stippled, like poked with something.
Yes.
So yeah, even little tools, people would steal them from, where they worked as well. So, if you could find something pointy, you can make that indent at night and then start playing.
Yeah. They can't have had that many pleasures on the prison hulks. What would a day in the life of a prisoner on a prison hulk, such as the Justicia, for example, at Woolwich, which is where I found these objects, which is why I've always thought that perhaps they could be associated with the prison hulks. I mean, how would life be during the day of a prisoner on a ship on the hulk?
I mean, it's kind of like a classic, I'd say like a shipboard routine, So if you think about like what you would imagine like in a normal prison on land is basically that, you're in a cell and you're in a building and you're sharing the space with loads of other different people. So you're still with loads of people on a ship, but it's completely different. So the way that you sleep, you're in a hammock, and you wake up in the morning, you roll up your hammock, you go and have breakfast with everyone on the decks of the ship. And then you get rowed out to the shoreline and you start working. So what the convicts were doing down in Woolwich, these prison hulks, they're kind of like mobile labour depots. They moved them around whenever the government needed to have people working on infrastructure projects. So you end up with convicts working in Woolwich because they're kind of like deepening the Thames, like the channel of the Thames, to make it more navigable for bigger ships. So as shipping expands and ships get bigger, they need to literally modify the banks of the Thames so the ships can go down. So the convicts are like dredging the Thames, they're hauling timber and ballast, so unloading ships and things like that. So you're doing that all day until early evening, and then you get rowed back onto the hulks at night. Sometimes, like by the sort of mid-19th century, they start trying to introduce reforms. So, you go back home, you're exhausted from a day's work, and then you have to learn the alphabet.
Oh, gosh.
You have to learn how to read and write, because they say this is good. This is, a good moral Christian learning that we're kind of teaching convicts how to be better people by educating them. But you're exhausted. You've literally spent all day, in the Thames. You're covered in mud. Just utterly exhausting. You've got, quite meagre rations as well, like gruel and that kind of thing. So you go back home, you've done your lessons for the day, and they literally lock the doors and they leave you on the decks with, up to 300 men were on these hulks. So, you're kind of, your evenings are your own in a way. It's going to be dark.
Of course.
But if you can, smuggle a candle in, you can start gambling or, sometimes fights broke out and things like that. So it's all kinds of things can happen on the hulks in the evenings. Okay,
and actually, come to think of it, at Woolwich, for example, when were the hulks there? From when till when?
They were there for... weird thing about the prison hulks was they were supposed to be this temporary measure. So they start them in 1776 in the sort of reaction to the American Revolution. Britain used to always transport its convicts to America. Then when the American Revolution happens, you suddenly have to come up with a new solution. So they say, okay, what should we do? We'll convert old naval warships and we'll make them into floating prisons, and they can be used to house prisoners just in that interim period while we wait and come up with a solution. So so they kind of do that, and they're in Woolwich from 1776 right up until 1857. They said that they'd only be there for a couple of years, but they're actually there for 80 different ships. But over that whole 80-year period, Woolwich is this kind of hub for convicts, naval, military, just everyone is all around together.
And I have found this, which is also made of lead, and it's got a name, scratched into it. Now, of course, it might not come from anybody related to the prison hulks, but we did manage to find the name of a man that corresponds to this, because it looks like W. Gailey, and it's actually back to front, so perhaps used to print something. But William Gailey, who we found, who was actually sentenced to time on the Justicia, he was sentenced for something so trivial, which was actually stealing a duck.
Yeah.
It seems such an over-the-top punishment to go on something like a prison hulk. What was the kind of thing that people would do that might actually make them end up on a prison hulk?
It's like you say, it's really trivial. So you can get sentenced for something like... This is heavier than I was expecting.
It is heavy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting, like you say, because it's back to front. It's like, was it made to stamp on clothing?
Yeah, and it's got
a label.
Yeah, and it's got like a hole.
Yeah, but yeah, people are transported for such ridiculous things that we think now. So children, as as young as 8 were on the prison
Oh
hulks.
my gosh.
So it's an all-male environment, so there's no women on board prison hulks.
Right.
They're in prisons on land, but so you get men on board prison hulks, and so they're as young as 8. I've found people as old as 80 on them. So, you know, real kind of mixed environment. But yeah, it's things like stealing handkerchiefs, like literally things that you see in, you know, Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
So it's like the Artful Dodger and the handkerchiefs. Loads of children are transported to Australia for stealing those. You've got people stealing ducks. I've got people stealing turkeys, and they're from all over. It's not just a wildfowl, but like
swans.
Yeah, swans. Well, swans. We won't go into that. But yeah, so they have loads of things you get transported for. You know, it can be forgery, it can be murder, it can be assault. You know, you've got petty thefts. You know, so small scale crimes are really the most common things you get. But you get sentenced to, so say you're standing in the dock and like the Old Bailey and you've stolen a handkerchief, you could get sentenced to transportation for something like that. You have to go all the way to Australia. But prison hulks are this weird interim phase, like this in-between moment where you're sentenced, but you're not transported straight away. So they take you down to, you know, say you're at the Old Bailey, they take you down to, you know, Blackfriars and then take you on a little boat all the way down to Woolwich. And then you're on a prison hulk maybe for a couple of months, if you're lucky, because they're not nice places, or you could be on them for a couple of years, and then you're transported to Australia. And new life. Yeah,
gosh,
lies ahead.
So it's really a lot of poor people, I expect, that were on the hulks. People that
there's
are hungry, that are desperate. Because how desperate do you have to be to go out and steal a duck or a piece of cheese?
Yeah,
or
that's why it's always so
bit of
sad,
bread?
because it's literally things like I stole a loaf of bread, you know, or, you know, I'm trying to feed my family. And you get tons and tons of letters that are written to like the Home Office who are in charge of prisoners, saying, I'm destitute, I'm the wife of a convict. You know, please come and, you know, we need money. We need the breadwinner back because, you know, you're stealing to survive at that point.
Yeah, and I don't suppose they could go and visit their husbands or partners or on the hulks, could they?
Yeah, that's the weird thing. It's like if you lived in the sort of London area and your partner, you know, or the breadwinner, your son, your husband gets transported or sentenced to transportation, you could technically go to Woolwich, but it's going to be quite a long walk. You know, there's no transportation systems. But then there's people from Halifax or Scotland or Dundee or, you know, anything who are transported there. So you've got no chance of seeing your family if you're from outside the London area. And even then it's, you know, it's a day off work.
Yeah, of course.
Couple of days, it's exhausting, yeah.
So I've got here one of my favourite finds, actually, and I've got 2 of them now. This is a tiny button marked with Millbank Prison, and it's got a Victorian crown on it. Millbank Prison, when was that built? Was it early 1800s?
1812, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because this is what made me become fascinated with the hulks. I thought, how did
so cool.
a button from Millbank get from Millbank, which is where actually the Tate Britain is now, all the way up in London? How did this end up in Woolwich? And not only one, but 2 of them. So are you able to explain any theories that might explain how this button ended up in Woolwich?
I think this button is like my favourite thing. I'm so excited by this. So Millbank Prison, you know, it's built, you know, it's a penitentiary, right? So it's one of these new modern prisons, and they think it's going to be great, but actually it's really terrible. And so what happened? Say you think this is maybe from like 1840s-ish.
Yeah.
You know, so we're sort of mid 19th century. We're thinking, like I've done a lot of reading on the 1847, right? So 1847, there's this big inquiry about the prison hulks in the government because convicts actually write letters to members of parliament saying they're letting us die so that we can be sent to the anatomy schools. They want our dead bodies. So it's really like shocking. They go in the you know, it's in the Times, and, you know, all the MPs stand up in parliament and say, what is going on with all these prisoners? You know, why are we treating them like this? So, you know, a committee goes out and investigates, and they find out that Millbank prisoners are being transported down the river to the hulks in Woolwich to die. So if you're ill or sick and dying in Millbank prison, they used to send sick convicts all the way down the river to die on the hulks. And that meant that Millbank prison could say, no, we have really good death rates. No one's died in Millbank for a while. Meanwhile, prison hulks, they're just, you know, everyone's dying on them, and they're saying, no, we're actually not as unsanitary as, you know, the government thinks. It's, you know, it's just that everyone's transporting ill prisoners to the hulks to falsify their returns. So, but yeah, loads of, if you were going to be transported, you would be sent down the river to the hulks, because then you'd be sort of like boarded there and then go to, Australia. So yeah, there's lots of connections between the two. People were always petitioning, can I be moved to this prison? Can I be moved here? Can I be moved out of the hulks? Get that lot. Lots of people are like, the hulks are terrible. They're so unsanitary. They're full of disease. I'm not going to make it. Everyone's saying, like, I will die if I don't move out of here. So the fact that we've got this little Millbank sort of connection is so interesting, that it found its way all the way down to Woolwich.
Yes, honestly, sometimes I just wish that these artefacts could talk, because imagine the incredible tales they could tell. These two buttons, and one of them has been recorded on the Portable Antiquities scheme, actually, because I don't think anybody else has found a Millbank button. Is your feeling that this would have been a guard button or a prisoner uniform button, or can you even...
It's kind of difficult to tell, isn't it? Because prisoners obviously wore uniforms. It's one of the, in the very early days to like end of the 18th century, they didn't. And immediately everyone was like, if someone escaped from a convict hulk, you wouldn't be able to tell that they were an escaped prisoner. So they immediately was like, okay, we need to put them in uniforms. So they started wearing brown uniforms. Then in the 1850s, they're wearing grey uniforms. No buttons ever get mentioned, but I don't kind of see why we wouldn't have like Millbank branded buttons on your convict, uniform. I wish there would be one that said, Justicia Hulk on it, so we could tell. That
would be incredible, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it? So one of the things I also wanted to mention to you is this lovely bottle seal here. It's lovely, isn't it? It would have come off of a bottle probably containing some form of alcohol. It's like a blob seal. And it's got G. Prentice on it.
Yeah.
And Sheer Hulk Tavern, Woolwich. So this was a tavern very close to Woolwich. And when I found it, I thought, oh my gosh, Sheer Hulk. I immediately thought maybe it's something to do with the hulks.
Yeah.
And apparently this tavern was built out of old timbers from
old
ships. Yeah. But what's interesting is it did say that this tavern was renowned for giving convicts a shot of rum before they set off on their journey across the seas to go to Australia. Have you ever heard of that?
I haven't, but I love that is a story that you found, because it kind of gets to the point, we were talking about this, it kind of gets to the point where, does it matter if we know that it happened, or
true.
Is it just kind of, I don't know, I've talked to students about this, it's like, is it just that we get that feeling that might have happened? That's quite exciting. So yeah, it makes me, I'm not sure whether you would be allowed to give, a prisoner some rum, but people did make friendships when they were, working in the dockyards. Yes, you're a convict, you're working in the dockyard. Who's supervising you? Who's letting you in the gates every morning? There's all these different people who aren't convicts who are working there. People became friends with people. That's how they got little bits and objects and tools and alcohol. Every now and then there is a riot on board the prison hulks and they say they're drunk. Where did they get that booze from? It's probably people like C. Prentice, but yeah, we know that the local communities really objected to prison hulks when they started being moored in Woolwich. They said they're dangerous. There's going to be. They said it was so noisy. The ship every night when they locked down those hatches, they said that the ship would just erupt with noise, and all the local inhabitants are sitting there in their houses going,
getting worried, because imagine if they all got off.
Exactly. So it's kind of, everyone's getting anxious about it all, but yeah, people made friends. People, there's lots of opportunities, even if you were able to even write a letter home or send a little object home, you can slip it in the hand of someone who's your workmate or your friend, that you can do a little nod and a wink to.
Yes. And talking of convicts making things, I mean, this little figurine here, and you will have seen this if you've watched the series, because Claire studied this little lady, and we were talking earlier. I mean, I found this in Woolwich too, so I often wondered, maybe did she have something to do with prisoners on a hulk? And you've heard of some toys that prisoners made that were a little bit dubious. I mean,
See, this one looks, I'm going to say this one looks a bit classy.
It does actually, doesn't
so
it?
I'm not sure. But so basically I
up.
was saying that I did this there was an investigation on board the prison hulks in Portsmouth. So it was a different location, but we can kind of surmise it's the same thing going on everywhere. 1812, people go around the hulks and they say, we found a lot of indecent toys made out of bone for sale. So people are like carving things out of, they're given beef and boiled beef and that kind of thing. A calf's head between 6 is one of the main rations that you get. So bad beef, but there's bone there. So once you've boiled it off and you can polish it up and you can start carving things. This looks a lot classier than the kind of thing that I would imagine.
Yeah.
They also made skeleton keys. Please tell me if you ever find one of those.
Okay.
Because, it said that they used to make skeleton keys on board the hulks. So, and they used to also, just do lots of coins. So they would always hammer out, it said they would hammer out half crowns into sixpences, because it's quite heavy, so you can make a couple of sixpences out of them. So yeah, they'd make things, but I always feel like with convicts, a lot of the time they're making things for themselves to use. So when you think about people making objects, sometimes it's to sell, but I really feel with those skeleton keys and the money, they're doing them to trade. They're doing them inside. It's like this kind of microcosm of floating society where inside they're trying to escape all the time. They're trying to get money, to get alcohol, to get, extra rations, anything. So we're just going home at night, bashing out coins and carving things. But yeah, this lady looks, I'd say she doesn't look indecent to me.
Okay.
What do you think?
Actually, no, you're right. You are right. And she's very...
it's beautiful.
She is rather beautiful,
Yeah.
isn't she? First of all, when I found her, I thought she was carved. I think that's where it came from. But she is actually made from a mould. But the fact that she's exposing herself, I suppose, that's maybe why I thought maybe
wishful
it could have
thinking,
been made by somebody that has been, prevented from.
Oh, I'd love it. Yeah, I
seeing a
mean, like we
woman
say,
for
there's all
years.
kinds of people on prison hulks. So maybe we had someone who just wanted something beautiful.
So what led then to the eventual ending of prison hulks, and when was that?
Well, they ended in England in 1857. So again, like I said, that's 80 years after they said they would run. They're literally only supposed to be there for a couple of years. So it has gone on long enough by that point. It's kind of a number of factors. So in Australia, like the colonists start saying, can you stop sending prisoners here? So, you get objection from the colonists. So when the ships are arriving, people are angry. So immediately the British government's thinking, okay, so we can't send them here. And then all the sort of prison hulks themselves start to fall apart.
Right.
So yeah, imagine like an 80-year-old ship that's already old when it started to be a hulk. There's examples of escapes where literally prisoners could push against the side of the walls and get out.
Climb out of the
because
wood.
the wood had rotted, because it's wet and, muddy and, so that kind of thing. So they're unsanitary. People in the local area started to say they were the cause of cholera and disease. Obviously we know now that isn't the reason why, but the whole miasma theory in the 19th century, you breathe in bad air. What's worse air than dirty convicts and a dirty, rotting... That's what Henry Mayhew, the reformer, went on board the prison hulks, and he called them a leaky, rotten tub.
Oh, gosh.
And so he was like, they're disgusting. So what they do with the convicts, they actually make them build prisons on land. So instead of dredging the dockyard, we've done the dockyard dredging now, it's all over. So they're just like, well, build a prison. So they start building prisons, and basically you sort of move house. And then there's a sort of gradual deterioration of the ships. People don't like them.
Yeah.
Just all sort of fizzles out by the 1850s. Yeah.
Well, it's been fascinating talking about this. And is there anything else that you would like to say about the subject or prisons in general?
Well, I really liked Ted's essay, and I just wanted to say there's a line in it where it says, like, these stories, does it matter if, we're correct about, it's kind of like, can we really tell whether, these things are from the hulks or not? Does it matter?
Yeah, that's right, actually. He says it here. He says, it's not inconceivable that these lead tokens came from prison hulks, but it's just as likely they fell from the land. This collection of objects and the prison hulks are constructed companions, told together in one story because of the proximity to both river and land, the liminal space of the foreshore. And honestly, I don't feel the need to get to the bottom of this unknown. They are all stories.
I just love that. That to me is like, I love that we're having this talk about it. I love that we're building these ideas in our head of what, you know, these things. We're basically assigning meaning to every single one of these things, and I love that. You know, it's great if they're from the hulks. I want them to be from the hulks.
Yes.
But if it isn't, we've literally just, you know, we're full of imagination because of them.
We are.
So I love that line, and I love these objects. Yeah.
And where can people find out more about your work? You've written some
website.
articles.
Yeah. So I've got a website, but I've also written some articles on prison hulks, but lots of kind of publicly accessible things as well. So literally Google prison hulks and you'll probably find it.
Okay, Google prison hulks and find Anna. And so you can actually read Ted Tinkler's essay in the Lost and Found booklet here. You can download this for free from the Thames Festival Trust's website. And you can also receive a hard copy if you drop me an email. And so, well, that's the end of this series. I feel like there should be something special that I do now, but I just want to say a big thank you.
Oh, no problem. Well, thank you for showing me these things. It's so nice to see objects in the flesh.
Yeah, it's special, isn't it? And to
Very
think that
much.
they've all been held and handled by people long gone. And thank you for telling us all about the hulks and for sharing your expertise with us. And thank you everybody for watching. And of course, do put in the comments below any thoughts that you might have about this topic, or indeed any of the things that we've discussed in the past. And it's been great sharing this series with you. And I'll see you again very soon. Thank you.